My presentation today is on the exploration of Miss, Mrs., or Miss. We're going to see how women's titles has an effect on how they're viewed in society. So it's important that we take a look at the history behind the honorific Miss because it actually hasn't been around for as long as you may think. The Oxford Dictionary first dates the publication of Miss back in 1952, and that was for the National Office Management Association. And the funny thing is that the term started gaining a little bit more popularity as computers did. Computers had programmed themselves to use Miss MS to be used if marital status was unknown. And this makes sense. Think about it. When you're writing an email to someone and you want to address them in the form of their honorific and their last name, and you don't know their marital status, you always use Miss. Many women started liking the idea of not having to give away their relationship status when they first meet somebody. Believe it or not, having Miss adopted as a standard term was a huge victory for women during the second wave feminist movement. Women had started questioning why they had to tie their name to their relationship status. They wanted to attempt to be known as something other than just as someone's wife. And it was actually a battle that had to be fought. It took the New York Times, one of the biggest newspapers in America, 10 years to allow the use of the word. Women had asked the paper to first adopt the term in 1972, and they didn't officially accept it until 1986. So, fast forward to today. All three prefixes are common, but how equally common are they? We're going to explore what prefix women tend to use more, and we're going to dive deeper into how this decision affects how others look at them. The questions that I was looking to explore is if there is a commonality between women who choose Mrs. over Miss, such as age or background. I'm hypothesizing that age does play a factor. I do think that older women will choose Mrs. more than Miss. I also wanted to look at if the prefix has an effect on others' first impression of them. My research was mostly conducted through surveys and a few verbal interviews. The subjects I decided to narrow down on were 10 preschool teachers ages 24 to 62, of course, all female, and 3 school children ages 12 to 15, both male and female. The reason I chose these subjects is because preschool teachers usually give a prefix in front of their name, and children often have an impression of their teachers before they meet them. They have a direct relation to each other, and therefore I feel they would be great examples of my research. The teachers were each given surveys to answer anonymously, which asked the following questions. What honorific do you prefer? What is your relationship status? What is your age? What is your ethnicity? Does someone's chosen prefix have any effect on your first impression of them? The verbal interviews did vary based off the responses to each question. I kind of went with it as I asked them, and they were recorded. The main question for students was what their first impressions are when they see their teachers use Miss, Mrs., or Miss. Some teachers were also asked verbally the logic behind which prefix they chose. The first results we're going to look at are which prefix was actually more popular. As you can see in the bar graph shown below, 60% of the women I interviewed preferred to be called Miss, MS. 20% actually preferred no prefix or to be called by their first name only. 10% preferred Mrs. and 10% preferred Miss, MISS. Data for my participants' relationship status is as followed. 50% of them were married and 50% of them were single. So we had exactly half and half, with only one of the married choosing the prefix Mrs. Age results. So I grouped my data into two categories, ages 20 through 39 and ages 40 plus. Approximately 30% of the age 20 to 39 had chosen Miss, 10% had chosen Mrs., and 10% had chosen Miss. None of the women in the age category 20 to 39 had chose to their first name or none. In the age 40 plus category, 20% of the women chose Miss, 10% chose Mrs., 0% chose Miss, and 20% chose none. Although most women choose Miss regardless of age, we can see a slight trend of older women choosing no prefix at all. Something interesting I thought was that no women in the 40 plus category had chose Miss. Now let's take a look at the highlights of the verbal interviews with the children. I had first interviewed a male student who was 12 years old and in 6th grade. My question to him was, if your teacher goes by Mrs., what is your first thought? He had said, well, that she's older and she probably gives harder homework, also that she might be more stressed out. I had asked a female student who was 14 years old that what she thinks of when she first sees each prefix. She said that Miss is more for a young lady. I would say you're probably Miss, but as you get older, you become Miss, and then when you're married, Mrs. The last student I interviewed was a male student who was 15 years old. He had said that he doesn't think seeing a teacher has Miss or Mrs. in front of their name affects what he thinks of them, but that he does relate it to age. Usually, Miss is someone younger, whereas Mrs. would be someone older. Now let's take a look at the verbal interviews with the teachers. I had asked them why they had chosen their chosen honorific. The first teacher I asked was age 29 and was married. She said, I choose Mrs. because I go by my husband's last name only, and I guess I want my children and I to have the same last name. It's just easier that way. The next teacher was age 62 and she was married as well. I choose Miss because I feel women shouldn't have to give away their relationship status while men don't. The last teacher I had asked was age 61 and her marital status was single. I prefer just to be called my first name. It's easier for the students and I feel in general it's more friendly. Now let's take a look at what all of our data means. We can see from the data that more younger teachers were choosing Mrs. than the older teachers were, and more older teachers were choosing Miss or to have no prefix at all. We can see that teachers are basing their decision on their own personalities and that it really has nothing to do with their marital status. But on the contrary, we can see that students are regularly associating a woman's prefix with their age. Every child that I had interviewed had something to say about age. As an honorific that recently became established as a word not that long ago, we can see that Miss is a lot more popular of a prefix than Miss or Mrs. is. In conclusion, we can see that more and more women feel that they should not need to present their marital status with their name. As we saw from the data, more women chose Miss or chose no prefix at all over presenting themselves as Miss MISS or Mrs. MRS. We also saw that society does have a preconceived notion that Miss is reserved for younger women while Mrs. is reserved for older women. We saw that in the data with the children as well as my hypothesis that it would have to do with age. Why is it that we associate being older with having to be married? The notion that society relates age to a woman's prefix is found to be opposite of what the data found. On the contrary, more women are preferring not to mention marital status at all. It seems women have to choose between giving away their relationship status or age, yet men only still have Mr., which gives away none of the above. And that's all, folks. Thanks for viewing my presentation.